You're 65 years old. You've lost everything. Your restaurant is gone, your savings wiped out, and the government gives you just $105 a month to scrape by. Most people in that situation would quietly accept defeat. They'd settle into retirement, bitter and broken, telling themselves the game was over. But Harland David Sanders wasn't like most people. Instead, this white-haired man with a string tie and a stubborn streak got into his beat-up car. He carried with him nothing more than a few pressure cookers, a bag of flour, and a recipe of 11 secret herbs and spices. He drove from town to town, knocking on doors of diners and cafes, begging owners to let him cook chicken for their staff. Most laughed at him. Some slammed the door in his face. Others said flat out, "You're too old. No one wants your chicken." And yet, he didn't quit. He was rejected not once, not 10 times, not even 100 times, but 1,009 times. And then came rejection number 1,010. That was the one that changed everything. That single yes from a small restaurant owner in Salt Lake City launched a chain reaction that would turn Sanders from a broke retiree living in his car into the face of the world's second largest fast food empire. This isn't just the story of fried chicken. It's the story of resilience, vision, and systems thinking. This is the untold story of Colonel Harland Sanders. Harland Sanders was born in 1890 in a small farmhouse in Henryville, Indiana. Life was tough from the start. His father was a mild-mannered man who worked long hours on the farm. But when Harland was just 6 years old, tragedy struck. His father died suddenly, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone. Back then, there were no safety nets, no welfare, no life insurance. His mother had no choice but to take whatever job she could, sewing, farming, even odd jobs for neighbors, just to keep food on the table. That meant little Harland had to grow up fast. At 6 years old, he found himself standing on a wooden stool in front of a hot stove, stirring pots of vegetables, baking bread, and frying meats for his siblings. While other kids were out playing marbles in the dirt, Harland was learning how to cook. And here's the twist of fate. In those long afternoons, sweating over boiling pots, Harland developed a love for food, a skill that would one day define his entire life. But for now, it was just survival. By 13, the pressure at home became too much. Harland left school after 7th grade and left home soon after, convinced that the world had something better for him, though he had no idea what. From his teenage years to his mid-60s, Harland Sanders lived a life that looked, on paper, like an endless series of failures. He tried to study law, but got into a fistfight with his own client in the courtroom. That ended his career in an instant. He tried selling insurance, but was fired twice. His temper and stubbornness often got the best of him. He started a ferry boat business that did well at first, until a bridge was built across the same river and wiped him out. He tried selling lamps, but electricity arrived and destroyed the entire gas lamp industry. He even worked for the railroad for a while, until once again his fiery temper ended in a physical fight. Over and over, Harland would rise a little, then fall. He spent decades bouncing from job to job, barely scraping by. He was married, had children, but his unstable career left him constantly struggling to provide. By his own admission, Harland Sanders had failed at nearly everything he tried. And yet, he kept moving. He kept experimenting. He kept learning. Every failure, painful as it was, left behind lessons about people, about persistence, about the brutal reality of business. Little did he know, all those failures were building the foundation for something extraordinary. By the time Harland hit his 40s, he was running out of options. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, he found work operating a Shell gas station in Corbin, Kentucky. It was here that everything changed. Travelers and truckers passing through often stopped for gas, and Harland, remembering his childhood in the kitchen, began cooking fried chicken for them on the side. At first, it was simple, just some chicken, biscuits, and vegetables. But word spread. The chicken was good, really good. Soon, People weren't just coming for gas. They were coming for Sanders' fried chicken. He perfected his cooking method using a pressure cooker, which allowed him to fry chicken faster than traditional methods, while keeping it juicy and flavorful. And then came his secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices. It was unlike anything people had ever tasted. The gas station turned into a small restaurant. That small restaurant turned into a larger one, with 140 seats. For the first time in his life, Harland Sanders was not just surviving. He was thriving. He became a local celebrity. In 1935, the governor of Kentucky even honored him with the title Colonel, a symbolic gesture recognizing his contribution to the state's cuisine. At last, after decades of failure, Harland Sanders was a success. But fate wasn't done testing him. By the 1950s, Sanders' restaurant was thriving. Travelers stopped by in droves, and his fried chicken became famous across the region. Then, in 1956, disaster struck again. The government built a new interstate highway, and it bypassed Corbin, Kentucky. Almost overnight, the steady stream of customers disappeared. His restaurant went from packed to empty. His business collapsed. At 65 years old, Harland Sanders was broke once more. He had no restaurant, no savings, and no real prospects. All he had was a small Social Security check, just $105 a month. For most people, that would have been the end of dream, the end of ambition, the start of a bitter, defeated retirement. But not Harland Sanders. Instead of giving up, he packed his car with his pressure cookers, flour, seasoning, and his secret recipe. He was about to start his boldest venture yet. Imagine being 65 years old, broke, living off a tiny government check, with nothing left but your pride and a recipe you believe in. That's exactly where Harland Sanders found himself in 1956. Most men his age were slowing down, retiring, fading quietly into the background. But Sanders refused to give in. Instead, he turned his old car into a rolling office and kitchen. He filled the trunk with pressure cookers, bags of flour, jars of seasoning, and his secret recipe. Then he set out on the road. The plan was simple, but the execution was brutal. He would drive to a diner or restaurant, walk in, and make his pitch. "Let me cook chicken for you and your staff. If you like it, you can put it on the menu. I'll even supply the seasoning. All I ask in return is 5 cents for every piece of chicken you sell." It was bold, almost laughable. Here was a white-haired retiree with no money, no restaurant, no investors, walking into businesses and asking them to risk their reputation on his fried chicken. And the answer was almost always the same: no. Over and over, he heard the same rejections. Some owners said the chicken business was too risky. Others didn't trust an old man with a secret recipe. Some laughed in his face. Many didn't even let him finish his pitch. Rejection number 10. Rejection number 100. Rejection number 500. By the time he hit rejection number 1,000, most people would have quit. They would have packed it in and admitted the world didn't want what they had to offer. But not Sanders. Finally, after 1,009 rejections, he found a small diner willing to say yes. That yes was the crack in the dam, the proof of concept, the first domino in what would become a fast food revolution. This wasn't blind persistence. Sanders wasn't just banging his head against the wall. Every no taught him something about what restaurant owners feared: costs, consistency, training. And every time, he refined his pitch. Instead of offering just chicken, he offered a system. He promised to train the staff, provide the seasoning, and guarantee consistency. The restaurants didn't need to invest heavily. All they had to do was sell the chicken. Sanders had discovered something powerful: a franchise model. The genius of Sanders wasn't just his chicken. It was the way he structured his business. He didn't try to build new restaurants from scratch. That would have required millions of dollars he didn't have. Instead, he leveraged what already existed: other people's restaurants. For every piece of chicken they sold, he earned a nickel. It didn't sound like much, but multiplied across dozens, then hundreds of restaurants, those nickels began to add up to serious money. This was systems thinking. Sanders wasn't just selling chicken. He was selling a repeatable model that scaled without him needing to open or manage each location. By the early 1960s, just a few years after sleeping in his car, Sanders had over 200 franchise locations. By 1963, that number had exploded to 600. From complete failure at 65 to running a multi-million-dollar operation by 73, Sanders had built one of the most remarkable comebacks in business history. But there was something else Sanders did brilliantly. He became his own brand. The white suit, black string tie, goatee, and glasses weren't just personal style. They were a carefully crafted image. Sanders leaned into his Kentucky Colonel persona so completely that he became larger than life. He didn't just sell chicken, he was the chicken, and he worked tirelessly to promote it. Even after selling the company in 1964 for $2 million, around $20 million today, Sanders didn't retire to a quiet life of leisure. Instead, he became the face of KFC. He traveled more than 200,000 miles a year, visiting franchisees, appearing in commercials, shaking hands, posing for photos, and spreading the gospel of his fried chicken. This was long before the age of Instagram or influencer culture. But Sanders intuitively understood personal branding. People didn't just trust KFC because of the food. They trusted it because of him, and that trust turned into loyalty. By 1964, KFC was booming. Sanders was 74 years old, and the company was growing so quickly that it needed more infrastructure than he could provide. So he made the decision to sell. He sold the business for $2 million to a group of investors, but with two conditions. 1, he would remain the face and symbol of KFC. 2, the quality of his chicken recipe would never be compromised. Even after the sale, Sanders stayed deeply involved. He visited restaurants, tasted the food, and wasn't shy about criticizing any location that didn't meet his standards. Sometimes, he even stormed into kitchens to lecture cooks about what they were doing wrong. To him, this wasn't just business. It was personal. By the time Sanders passed away in 1980, KFC had exploded into a global empire with over 6,000 locations worldwide. Today, that number is over 25,000 in more than 145 countries. His face is still on every bucket of chicken. His white suit and black tie are instantly recognizable symbols around the world. Even people who have never tasted KFC know who Colonel Sanders is. Think about that for a second. A man who was once broke, sleeping in his car, rejected over 1,000 times, is now one of the most recognizable figures in global business history. His brand has outlived him by decades and continues to thrive. So what do we really learn from Colonel Sanders? It's not just about persistence, though his persistence is legendary. It's not just about passion, though he clearly loved his chicken. It's about systems. Sanders failed for decades because he was relying on himself. One man, one business, one location. When he finally found success, it was because he built a system that scaled beyond him. A system that worked even when he wasn't there. He turned his secret recipe into a machine that multiplied. That's why his story resonates so deeply. It's proof that it's never too late to start over. That failure is not the end. It's data. That success isn't about hustling endlessly, but about creating something that works without you. From a $15 Social Security check to a global empire, Colonel Sanders' life is one of the greatest comeback stories in business history. And it all started with one man, one car, one recipe, and a refusal to quit. So the next time you drive past a KFC, take a second to think about the man behind the logo. A man who didn't taste true success until his late 60s. A man who endured over 1,000 rejections before hearing his first yes. A man who proved that systems,
Colonel Harland David
not
Sanders
hustle
was
alone,
born on September
create
9th,
empires.
1890, in
Because at
Henryville,
the end of the
Indiana.
day,
For the
Colonel
first
Sanders
5 years of his
didn't
life,
just
he
sell
lived a
chicken.
normal childhood
He sold
with his
hope.
father, mother,
He sold
and
the
2 younger
idea
siblings.
that no matter
But at
how
6
many
years
times
old,
you
everything
fail,
changed after
no
his
matter how
father
late
passed
you
away.
start,
His
if
mother
you
had to
build
go
the
get a
right
job at a
system and
tomato
stick to
cannery
it,
and no
you
longer
can
had
leave a
time to look
legacy
after
that
the children.
outlives you.
So Sanders' job
That is
became
the
taking
real
care of
secret
his younger
recipe.
brother and sister.